We welcome you to the special live post-game edition of Saints Tonight Primetime Edition. Along with Eric Ritchie, I'm Victor Howell. We'll be joined by our Saints Super Bowl champ Scott Shanley, our Saints insider Mike Neighbors, who will join us from Minneapolis in what will be a very fluid evening after one of the most improbable, Eric, I don't even know where to start. Improbable comebacks after you play the first half where you never showed up. Then you've got the lead. Then it looks like the most improbable win. And then it comes down to one play and turns into the most improbable loss and probably the most devastating loss in franchise history.
And it'll be talked about for decades. I mean, it was literally a play to Stephon Diggs. Marcus Williams, at first look, you know, you're thinking like maybe he was trying to tackle him and worry about keeping him in bounds. But the more I watch that replay, it looks like, and I think that's what we'll hear when Marcus Williams talks, he was going to say that he was trying to avoid pass interference. It boils down to this. Watch the play, Victor. Right here, he's checking up so he doesn't hit him. I think he totally mistimed it. He came in a little bit early, and in doing so, obviously, he knocks out the rest of the Saints defense with the play and takes out his teammate, Ken Crowley, on the play. But bottom line is he checks up and doesn't want to hit Diggs before Diggs catches the football. And then there were some unbelievable scenes afterwards. They had to kick the extra point, Victor. That was some of the most unreal scenes I've ever seen. They had to bring Saints players out onto the field. There were 8 players lined up for the extra point. They were trying to get Chris Myers off the field and the network guys to stop trying to do interviews. 7 Saints came back, guys like Cam Jordan, Thomas Morstead lined up for the extra point afterwards. And again, while Case Keenum with the improbable leading that skull chant, it was just unbelievable.
And let's take it to Minneapolis. We'll hear from Saints head coach Sean Payton.
We did. I was proud of our players, though. We fought back in the second half, kind of climbed back in it, made enough plays to put ourselves in that position. This will take a while to get over, but at some point it'll pass. It'll take a little bit of time. But I thought, overall, I was proud of the fight, the way we played and responded in the second half. We dug ourselves in a hole in the first half, but in the end, you know, we came up short. Any questions? Yeah, like I just finished saying. I mean, proud of. I think there's been a lot of fight this year. You know, we've dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of different players, you know, a lot of injuries, and guys have stepped up. And look, they fought hard till the end and lost to a good team tonight, and you know, had a chance. We're in a position there.
I know you said it took a while to get over. You coached a lot of football teams, but just in the moment right now, is that? I mean, have you ever been part of anything like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, in our game, you play it long enough. You have some wins like that. You have some losses. The losses, you know, are tougher to get over. Hopefully, when your career is done, you're a part of more of the wins than you are the losses.
Sean, what was the defensive call that last play?
It was our outside zone. We're protecting the sidelines. You know, where you're anything inside, and you're in a pretty good position where the game's over. So it's you know, it's a situation we practice quite a bit. And look, he jumped and went for the tackle, and so the call, you know, the call was what we wanted in that situation, the right call.
What did you see from Drew from half 1 to half 2? Obviously,
well, we started, you know, catching some looks, making some plays. We converted some third downs, which we couldn't do in the first half. Then we got a little momentum going and stayed balanced. You know, we still managed to be able to run the football, but I think more importantly, we were able to convert some third downs.
Have you got a chance to say anything to Marcus?
No, I will at times, at some point. But look, it's not on one player now. I mean, you guys, I'm sure will want to swamp his locker. He's played well for us all year. And it was a timing decision, obviously. You know, he'd like to have that back, but he's been a good player for us all year.
What about the challenges?
Well, our monitor was down. Our booth was the only booth that didn't have a feed to it. So, I mean, you just got to go with your gut, and fortunately, that wasn't an issue with the timeouts.
What made you go with the trick play there in that spot?
Which one? It was perfect situations, what we wanted, you know, man-to-man. It was like the timing of it, you know. So it was some of these things you have that don't come up, you know, hash mark but that 3rd and short was something we had wanted.
Did the feed go out?
But just the screen, yeah, the feed was out for for a handful. And listen, that happens though.
Started the game with it on though, but it just went out in the second half. So.
Yeah, I think so. It was out. We didn't get a look at any of those, so, you know, I didn't want to. I felt, look, they were significant enough calls, and like I said, fortunately, the timeouts, you know, didn't affect us.
What about Will Lutz's?
His big kick, right? His big kick. I was proud of him. You know, he felt confident. I had gone out basically just to remind him they had called a timeout, so, you know, he wasn't going to get another timeout called. But he hit it clean, and guys did a good job. Special teams played well. Block punt was big. That led to a touchdown. There's a number of things that, you know, that helped to turn around in the second half.
What was your message in the locker room after?
That's our business. Just, you know, it's a special group, young group, but that's for us.
Not to belabor that, but because it's a young group, do you do anything differently or handle it differently after a loss like this?
No, we try to be, straightforward, and look, everyone's disappointed. You know, you get that close to advancing again. It's a tough loss. It's a difficult loss.
Sean, how much do you think the environment in that first half played a factor in?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's a good environment. They do a good job with the production here. It's probably one of the better home game environments you see in our league. But I think, you know, we just didn't play well enough and didn't do a good enough job early, but fortunately we were able to kind of bounce back in the second half.
It seemed like you guys had some issues with them big plays defensively. You guys, that running.
There was a couple, yeah.
Was there an adjustment to that at all? After those
Yeah, a lot of times you level it and play it differently and don't get caught, you know, with depending on how tight the defenders are.
About the need to get the guys back on for the extra point.
No comment. I mean, I think that the only thing I'd say is don't let the team go into the locker room and then, you know what I mean? I thought they struggled tonight a little bit, but that wasn't, you know, it was a hard-fought game. It was a good game, I think, entertaining, and obviously not good when you don't win it.
Coach, after you absorb a loss like this, how soon do you think you'll turn attention to the business side of football?
Oh, I don't, listen, you're asking me that tonight. We'll keep you posted. I mean, we'll have a mandatory Monday or Tuesday visit with you guys, and we'll ask the same questions. But it turns pretty quickly to the next phase. But this is tough right now. Anything else?
In the first half, when Everson Griffin has that, his back's to Drew Brees and he tips the ball and they get an interception. Was there a point in that first half where it felt like everything he did just wasn't going your way?
No. No, you can't look at things that way. If you do, then you think, well, we're just not. You look at it like, hey, we got to be better with the calls. We got to execute better. I mean, you got to change that. You can't just look at it like things just aren't going your way. So we never think that way, ever, really. All right, thank you.
All right, so there are the comments from head coach Sean Payton. And again, this will be a very fluid live program tonight here on CST. As soon as we have a chance, we'll be joined by Scott Shanley. Deuce McAllister, our Hall of Famer, who of course called it on the Saints Radio Network, will join us with our Saints insider Mike Neighbors, who will get reaction from the players if and when they become available and feel like talking. And we know we will hear from quarterback Drew Brees a little later. Take you back to something Sean Payton said, though, about what Williams did there at the end. Before we see the play again, he talked about how well he's played all season. And you heard him talk about the call and about the spacing. And I'm going back to what you said about your thought is maybe he's trying to avoid the pass interference. I think as we take another look at it, though, what I want you to watch is the clock on the bottom of the screen, because there never should have been an issue of having a pass interference. It doesn't matter if Stephon Diggs catches this and runs for another 15 yards. You're now at 5 seconds, and Minnesota doesn't have a timeout. Even if you tackle him there, they can't get the kick team off. The big key was don't let anybody get behind you.
Yeah,
and you heard Sean Payton say it was all about timing. The question would be, and if I had a chance to question him right now, I would ask, why were you up so close? A lot of times on those plays, you have two guys standing on the goal line. So it's basically 11 against 9 with 2 safety valves on the back. So if they do break through, you have 2 guys that can then come forward to make a tackle. But the fact that he was that close, making a play with 4 seconds on the clock without a timeout, let him catch it, let him turn around and try to run it. And then if they're going to beat you, he's either A, going to outrun everybody, or B, it's going to be one of those crazy multilateral plays where they get to the end zone, and you'll look at it one more time from the backside where he comes up. If you're there right now, just let him catch it. Still let him catch it. But he whiffs and then takes out his own teammate, and there's nobody between him and St. Paul or Mankato, Minnesota, for him to run to when he goes to the end zone.
Victor, two things. Positioning comes into play as well. He's playing center field here. What you went back to is we're watching the game by our monitor. You said do not let anybody get behind you. Center fielder, you can't come up like that. That brings us to point two, which is exactly what we talked about even before Sean Payton went up there. Payton reiterates it, the key word, timing. He mistimed that play worse than anyone he ever would. And you heard Payton say he would love to have that play back. He's played so well his rookie season for this Saints football team. He had an interception in this football game that really helped swing the momentum in the second half, and we were praying for a big turnover, and Marcus Williams came through with that INT. He has played well all season, but as Sean Payton said, right now, the scene in his locker room right now, unfortunately, everyone wants to hear about his reaction, Victor, to what happened on that play in his eyes.
Well, the reaction there in the Saints locker room is echoed by 600-something thousand here in the city of New Orleans who were stunned, thinking 1 minute beforehand they're getting ready for more football in Philadelphia, and instead the season comes to an end. You know, Sean Payton comes from the Bill Parcells tree, and Bill Parcells was often quoted as saying he would tell his team, don't be the one player to make that one mistake that sends everybody home. Unfortunately, tonight, Williams, on what was the final play of the game, made a mistake that'll certainly be a glaring one that Saints fans will talk about for years to come. We want to go back to Minneapolis because I understand our Saints insider Mike Neighbors and my Super Bowl champ partner Scott Shanley standing by with us there. And Scott, I'm going to ask you, I know you've been a part of the biggest wins ever. Obviously, that would be a Super Bowl win. I know you've been a part of some disappointing losses. Can you even put into imaginary words what this must feel like for this program?
It's hard to put into words. And the closest thing I can tell you that I maybe came to was when we played to the 49ers. And I can still feel that ball grazing the tip of my finger where Vernon Davis caught it from Alex Smith. And I know this, I feel for Marcus Williams because I still think about that play a lot. I still think about what would have been if I could have just been one more inch and knocked that ball down. And it's going to be a play he replays over and over. And all I hope for this young man, he's got a long, bright career in front of him. I hope he doesn't let this play affect him going forward. But as far as this team, it was such a battle. A tale of two halves, two different games. This team battled till the end, and it hurts to see these guys walking off the field losing this game because it was a game they should not have lost.
And Minnesota is a franchise, Victor. Tough tradition. They've never won a Super Bowl. They've lost 4 Super Bowls, much like the Buffalo Bills, 9 in succession. But if you look at the franchises around the NFL, almost waiting for something bad to happen, this place was really loud as any stadium really I've been around, even as loud as maybe Kansas City at some points. Deathly quiet in that fourth quarter, though. They were expecting something bad to happen, and this is a franchise, Scott, you know, like I said, time and time again, we're waiting for something bad to happen, and the way the Saints came back, I mean, how many plays can we talk about? Taysom Hill with the block kick, then Alvin Kamara scores on the wheel route, and then to me, the big play was when Drew Brees hit Willie Snead for that 4th down. You thought, you know what, that's going to clinch the game. The way Will Lutz is kicking the football, then he gets the field goal. Just so many plays after so much went wrong in the first half, they really fought it out.
They really did. And when you look at this place, I don't know if there's a tougher environment in the NFL to play in. This place is pretty special. And I think what happened to this team was they got shell-shocked early on in the game, the youth playing in this type of environment. But once they settled down, it was clear the Saints, I believe, are the better team. They just ran out of time. They had one play that they could have won it at the end. But it was an environment where, Mike, you're right, this crowd was kind of thinking Blair Walsh, here we go again, Brett Favre, here we go again. They had that look in their eyes, and it was disbelief, but we were the ones standing there on the sideline disbelief when it was all said and done.
And how many times do you look at a football game when so many bad things happen? So you do so many things you shouldn't do. You knew you had to get off to a quick start. You couldn't turn the ball over. Scott, they don't convert 1 3rd down in the first half. Drew Brees throws 2 interceptions. For crying out loud, a defensive lineman from Minnesota has his back turned to Brees, bats the ball. It's an interception. You overcome all that, and you still almost win the football game. It says a lot about this football team.
It does, and that's why I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying the Saints are the better team when you're comparing them to the Minnesota Vikings. These are the type of games in the playoff games where home field advantage does play a part because they got shell-shocked early on. They got down too much to dig their way back. But the Saints, they made enough plays to get back in the game. You got to give them credit because there were tons of things that went against them, whether it's converting on 3rd down, whether it's turnovers, whether it's just penalties in the first half, setting them back. And they still overcame all those things and should have won this game.
You look at the NFC guys, the Saints, the Vikings, many say it's a preview for who's going to the Super Bowl. This Minnesota Vikings team, very, very talented, but the Saints, boy, they gave them all. They gave it to them all in this game. We'll have much more from the Superdome. Back to you. Or from the Metrodome, I should say, or from the old Metrodome. I'm all thunderstruck here.
We'll get you back to U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. We'll rejoin Mike and Scott. In fact, you guys stand by. You can listen in because it's been so fluid with Sean Payton going to the podium as soon as we came on the air. We haven't even had a chance to go through the highlights. But to their point, it was a dismal first half. But then the last quarter and a half was outstanding football. It's just you had to dig out of that hole. And then, of course, we already know about the last. It's just heartbreaking the city of New Orleans tonight after watching that final 10 seconds of the ball game as the Vikings advanced 29-24, getting past the Saints. Here's a look at the numbers behind that final score as the Vikings finished with 403 total yards, the Saints with 358. Eric, you look at the time of possession, and a lot of that really came in the first half. And while it was coming in the first half, go 3 lines up above that. 10 of 17 overall for third down, 2 of 9 for the Saints. But the Saints did not have a third down conversion in the entire first half. Minnesota was 5 of 8, so you can see why the time of possession is skewed, because so much of that was made in the first half when the Vikings built a 17-0 lead. Yeah, and no question, when they did convert that third down, Victor, not only did they convert 1, they converted 2. Then they get Drew Brees involved with hitting 8 of his first 9 passes in the second half after a dismal first half numbers-wise for a guy like Drew Brees. But everything changed. The momentum changes, the giddy-up on the plays. Even after the plays, you get Michael Thomas talking smack to Xavier. And you just saw a complete turnaround on that drive when they scored the touchdown to put them on the board. And what unfolded was absolute, they used the term instant classic. I mean, that doesn't even does this justice. Right. This is an instant documentary in the making. You could sit these guys down, storyline after storyline unfolded, even in the fourth quarter, even in the final 3 minutes. Yeah, it was amazing to see how they were able to turn it around after such a dismal performance. And you saw there in the final stats, 80 yards rushing for the Saints. And we knew going in, rushing was going to be a challenge, number one, because of that front line that Minnesota has. Remember, when they played in week 1, that was the Monday night game now, 18 weeks ago, now that this game is in the books when they played, the Saints had 60 yards rushing. Alvin Kamara led the way with 18, tied with Adrian Peterson. Remember that project, 18 yards. Mark Ingram had 17. When you go back, though, you might look at that factor of the rushing game, much like last week. Rushing game didn't go anywhere. You put it on Drew Brees' back, and what did he do at home? He carved Carolina apart. First half, it's not working very well for the Saints, and once again, they had to figure out something, and Drew Brees opened it up a little more. But I start to wonder, Eric, if you did need more of that rushing game. You've got 2 running backs that set NFL records in terms of total combined yards, yet only 80 yards up there in Minnesota. They just didn't have a chance to break through with any of those big plays we've seen all year. The first drive of the game exactly personifies what you're talking about. Mark Ingram carries the ball 5 yards on the first play of the game. Then they pass twice, 2 incomplete passes, and you're wondering, man, why don't you run the football a little bit more against a Vikings team that's done so well? You're having a little bit of success, and they never really got back to it, Victor, and they never did. That second half they did. Then Kamara starts getting a little bit momentum. He starts getting outside a little bit, and things changed a little bit in the second half. But right out of the gate, Ingram for 5 yards, pass, incomplete, punt, and you get Thomas Morstead hurt. Like, it couldn't have gone any worse at the beginning. Morstead with the rib injury right out of the gate. You see what he's trying to do. Not only was he manned up with punting, but on that extra point that was kicked by Will Lutz that we thought was going to send this franchise to Philadelphia for an NFC Championship game. Who was there on the hold? Very important. I know Chase Daniels was on the sideline warming up in case he had to come out and hold. But Will Lutz, those guys in special teams, they want everything exactly the same. And Thomas Morstead was right there with the great hold, great snap. The kick was great by Lutz. It just didn't have the happy ending. Understand some of the players are becoming available in Minneapolis now to talk. Let's take you back up there to Minneapolis, outside of the Saints locker room, and rejoin our Saints insider, Mike Neighbors. Mike?
Thank you very much, Victor Howell. Obviously a tough loss, tough locker room afterwards, but we appreciate Shelton Rankins, who was voted on by the local media as the best interview for the New Orleans Saints, living up to your award. Listen, just talk about the mood of this team afterwards. You guys fought back, and this was a heartbreaker.
It's obviously something that's you can't really describe, put into words, losing a game like that. But, this team has battled all season. We knew at halftime, we knew the game wasn't over. We knew all we had to do was play our brand of football. We could get back in this game. Just sucks it had to end the way it did. Hurt a lot of guys. You know, the way this league works, it's probably the last time all those guys collectively will be in that locker room together. So it hurts, but it's the nature of the business. You got to move on, and we'll be ready next season.
You're not a older player in this league, but you're a veteran compared to a lot of the younger guys in this team. I know Marcus Williams had a great game, tough play late. Any of the veterans say anything to him afterward in the locker room?
You just gotta let a kid like that know that it's not the end of the world. You know, that doesn't define your career. At the end of the day, nobody in that locker room would ever point at him and say he's the reason we lost that game. You know, there were plays earlier we could have made that, you know, could have helped us not even be in a situation like that. So that's just the way the dice roll sometimes. You know, I know everybody's going to point at him, you know, and the outside world's going to point at him for that play. But, you know, we just let him know that we got his back. He's a part of this team, and just use it as fuel to get better and, you know, just make up for it next year.
You look at the 53-man roster, 27 Saints have played in this league 3 years or less.
Right.
It's a tough loss, but you guys go through 2 playoff games where you really fought. How is that going to serve this team well moving forward now?
Battle tested. You know, a lot of these guys, a lot of those young guys played significant roles for this team going through that stretch. So we'll be battle tested. You know, guys will know that feeling. Guys actually participated in this will have that will to never feel this again. So I think going forward it serves us well. Now, obviously, you never want to, you know, have a lesson like this with the loss, you know, to happen that way. But it's the nature of the game. You learn from it, and we'll build upon this.
Finally, can you take a positive moving forward? Such a young football team. You lose your first 2 games. You battle back and win 8 in a row. You win the division. You win a playoff game. You prove a lot of people wrong this year. You have to feel good about where this team is heading in the future now.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know it's this loss still stings right now, so a lot of guys won't necessarily look at, you know, positives like that. But you know, it is good to know that, you know, this team is so young, and what this team has done, you know, with being able to battle through what we've gone through and be able to overcome it. So we're going to come back next year. You know, our veteran leaders will be back to lead us, and you know, us young guys, you know, with a few years in this league now, we'll be ready to step up and be leaders as well.
Listen, you're a true leader. Talking win or lose after these games and after maybe one of the toughest losses in franchise history. Have a great offseason. We'll see you down the road. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, Sheldon Rankin, Saints defensive lineman. We have Drew Brees coming up very shortly, guys. Back to you.
Sheldon, thanks so much. And, you know, it's one of those where you start talking like this, and Drew Brees, we understand, standing by. We'll get you right back to Minneapolis. It's one thing if it's a 40-point blowout and you can see the end of the game. You can see the end of your season coming a mile away, and you just got to get to it. It's another one of those where this is really that shock that sets in. When you're down 17-0, as Eric mentioned, you come out in the second half, and it takes one big play, and you flip the switch, and all of a sudden you're back in it. Then you take the lead, only to go down again, and then take the lead with 29 seconds to go and feel like they're going to have to drive the field on us and make a play, and we're going to Philly with the crowd, the environment, on the road, down 17 to come back, and then in 10 seconds after a timeout, that happens. Boy, it will take a while for this to sink in. I mean, it had taken a while for Saints. Saints fans are already just losing their mind, understandably so, watching it. But for the guys there, you go from the extreme of, we did it, to, are you kidding me? And then you got to go back to the locker room and pack up for the last time this season. Yeah, and think about all those young guys that we were referring to and what Mike just talked to with Sheldon Rankins and all the boxes that got checked off there at the tail end of the interview. Mike was trying to tell Sheldon, you know, this is a team that lost 2 out of the gate, won 8 straight, won a division, won a playoff game. Experience galore this team learned and gained in a big-time positive way. So, you know, you think that's a nice question at the end of an interview. You know, is there anything positive you can gain out of it? Well, sure. All those things mentioned bodes well for this Saints team's future with all the youth that, you know, learning tough and big time today. We talked about the performance of the second half and the way the Saints were able to rebound from tough turnovers. Drew Brees on the night, 25 of 40 for 294 yards. He had those 2 interceptions early, but was able to bounce back with those 3 touchdowns late. And of all the tough games we've seen as losses and all the incredible games we've seen as wins, each and every week we always respect Drew Brees because he stands by, insists to talk and share his thoughts with Mike Neighbors, and he's there to do so again tonight in Minneapolis as we take you back there with Mike.
Thank you very much, Victor Howell. Drew Brees joins us after arguably one of the toughest losses in Saints history. So many things went wrong for this football team in the first half, but you guys almost pulled off a miraculous comeback. What does it say about this team, the effort in that second half to get so close?
I think it says a ton about this team. I think it says everything about this team, and that is that, you know, no matter what deficit, you know, we're facing or challenge that we're facing, that you know, we're always going to stick together and continue to battle. And I mean, you should have felt the locker room at halftime. It was just, hey, listen, we knew we had played a crummy first half and didn't have any rhythm offensively and didn't do much of anything well. And yet, you know, there was no hole too big to dig ourselves out of. You know, we just knew we had to be really efficient and you know, just kind of find our rhythm, you know, and man, we got 4 possessions in the second half and got 24 points. I mean, that's pretty remarkable against the #1 defense in the league, statistically, at their place in the playoffs. I mean, so this team battled. Defense came up with some big stops. Special teams came up with a big play. But you know, we did everything we could there at the end.
You see certain plays in football games and you wonder if the cards are stacked against you when you have a defensive lineman with his back turned, just tips the ball and it's an interception. But you guys bounced back in the second half. What was the difference for this offense in the second half, you think?
We just found a rhythm. I mean, we didn't have very good tempo in the first half. We're just, you know, and again, just some kind of bad luck plays. You know, we score and it gets called back because, you know, they say we're not set, and you know, then that one results in that tip pick, and you're just, you know, so you kind of shake your head when that stuff happens. But again, you know, just gotta have poise. Gotta have poise in these situations and know that, hey, if we can just get back on track and put together one drive and then put together a second drive, that it all starts to come together.
You saw it last week, really, when you found Ted Ginn Jr. for that long pass. The offense got on track. And this week, to me, so many great plays, but I thought the wheel route to Kamara. This place was very loud, one of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in. You could hear a pin drop after that play. You guys could really sense something special in that play, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, and you know, that came after the block punt.
Taysom Hill, guy in the quarterback room, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we felt like, hey, here's our opportunity to take the lead, you know, so to fight all the way back and then to take the lead. I mean, I think that was a huge statement, you know, to everybody in that stadium and obviously to our sideline. And again, at that point, you know, no doubt we're going to win this game. You know, I mean, that was the mindset. You
and Michael Thomas really found a rhythm. Just talk about moving forward. The chemistry that you guys have just seems to get better by the game this season, really.
You know, he's a pleasure to be around and to work with, and I love his attitude. I love his fire and passion for the game. I love his competitive nature. He's a guy that, you know, at any moment it's like, hey, come to me, I'll win, you know. And it's like Jimmy Chitwood, you know, I'll make it. You know, it's just he's a stud, you know, and I can't say enough about really that whole group, that whole room. You know, Ted Ginn Jr. has been such an incredible addition to that room, and I mean, all those guys just you know, made it a lot of fun.
Part of that room is Willie Snead. We haven't seen a lot of him this season for different reasons, but talk about the big 4th and 10 completion and the fact that Sean Payton had faith in him with 3rd and inches to potentially make a throw downfield to Kamara. He was a big part of the game plan today.
No, he was, absolutely. And, you know, again, over the last half of the season, you know, he's had we've had plays that would be going to him, and it just hadn't, you know, shook out the way we thought at times. And so, you know, if you just looked at the numbers, you wouldn't realize the contributions, you know. And he came up with, obviously, a huge catch today, you know, that put us in field goal range, and, you know, was definitely a big part of the game plan.
How hard was it? You climb back, Will Lutz knocks that field goal through. It looks like you're on your way back. What were you thinking when you saw the game-winning play for the Vikings from your standpoint? What went through your mind?
Just stunned, shell-shocked, you know. How does that happen? Kind of a thing. You know, you kick the game winner with 25 seconds left, you know, you feel pretty good about your chances of winning.
Moving forward now, I know I've talked to you quite a bit over the past month in terms of your future with this team. I know you feel like your dialogue with Mickey Loomis is good. You fully expect to be back with the Saints moving forward now next season?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you feel good finally with this young football team. It seems to have re-energized you and Sean Payton now moving forward with so many young guys stepping up this year.
I love this team. I love being a part of this team. You know, from our young guys, our draft picks, to the guys that we went out and got in free agency, not just this year, but last year. I mean, it's a team that really loves one another, cares about one another, loves to play football, knows how to have fun, knows how to work. It's the most fun I've had playing football in a long time.
It's quite a roller coaster ride here, but great effort coming back. Your 11th season here with us at CST. Have a great offseason. We appreciate your time after every game.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, that's Drew Brees here in Minneapolis, guys. We'll have Deuce McAllister coming up shortly. Back to you.
Mike, thanks so much. And again, as always, we echo your sentiments to Drew. We thank him for his time. Very interesting. Steve Gleason is just such an icon. He's such a gentleman with everything he's doing. It's interesting when you read his tweets, and I'm going to share this. I'm sure Steve wouldn't mind, so I'm going to share it with you. This is what he put on Twitter just moments ago. Marcus Williams had a spectacular rookie season, could have a stellar career. He was trying to make the right decision. As a competitor, I'm sure he's crushed. I invite Nola to be encouraging and supportive as well as we all move on. He just kind of puts it in perspective. As down as the city is right now, you heard Drew Brees talking about it, the feeling of this young team. They're all going to be crushed, and they're going to be for a while. But you know what? Before you know it, you'll be having training camp. You'll be having the camps in Indy for the upcoming draft picks. You'll have the draft, and you'll be in OTAs. You'll be right back at it. You got to put it behind you now.
Yeah, no question about it. And Drew echoed those sentiments as well, as far as he has not had this much fun playing football in a long time. I love Mike asking him, about his future. He's done that on the exclusive one-on-ones that we've showed the last couple of weeks when he sat him down. But a real quick answer from Drew, yeah, I do anticipate being back as a part of this team. And yes, Victor, this season has revitalized the whole Sean Payton, Drew Brees era, because those two obviously are combined in what they do.
Well, you've had losing records the last few seasons. You started out 0-2. You're going to tell me at 0-2 we thought we'd be sitting here one step away from the NFC Championship? A lot of people would not have thought that, but the Saints were able to get to this stage. We want to take another quick time out, then we come back and get you right back to Minneapolis. Deuce McAllister has made his way down to sit with Mike. We will hear his thoughts as we continue on this post-game edition of Saints Tonight. It's one of those things when you're sitting at home, or you're sitting out at a restaurant or bar and you're watching the game as a fan, and then there's those of us like us getting ready to go to work, and we're all standing around monitors. How'd you like to be calling the action, knowing that you're 10 seconds away and probably saying you just need to make that one play, and then you have to be talking and telling everybody what is happening? Well, our Saints Hall of Famer, Deuce McAllister, was doing just that on the radio network. Unfortunately, we didn't get to hear the call because we're in here on the set getting ready to go live on the air. But Deuce has made his way to sit next to our Saints insider, Mike Neighbors. And, Mike, I'd be interesting to hear what Deuce was thinking in those final 10 seconds when the ball was caught with 5 on the clock, and with 4 on the clock, he turned and saw nothing but turf.
Thanks a lot, Victor. Deuce McAllister does join us. Victor posed an interesting question. You're in the broadcast booth with the legendary Jim Henderson. We just talked to Drew Brees, 25 ticks on the clock. Looks like the game's in hand, and all of a sudden it flips. What was the mood like calling a game like this, and just, you're prisoner of the moment?
Just disbelief. I mean, that was just unbelievable disbelief, and you're still in shock. I mean, because it's improbable that you make the comeback and you put yourself in that position, and you're in a good defense. They're guarding the sideline. I mean, you wanted the middle of the field for a catch to go there, and you just gotta make the tackle. And he doesn't. He goes in for the kill shot, and whether or not he was thinking about a penalty or getting there too soon, man, it just hurts. I mean, but he had a really good year. He had a really good year. This team has had a really good year. You're just disappointed that it ended in that fashion.
Deuce, you've been around this organization for a long time. You think this franchise has had a heartbreaking loss quite like this one?
Well, I don't know if there's been some bad losses. Yeah. I mean, there have been some bad walk-off ways to lose, but this one, being in the playoffs, you're a play away from going to the NFC Championship game. You have a young team already, and so it'll sting for a while, but you've got a good young base.
I've talked to everybody who's been around this team. Roman Harper was there at halftime. Even Drew Brees said, despite being down 17-0 at the half, the mood was good. They felt confident. I think that's been the characteristic of this team. They're a young team, but they're mature beyond their years, and they don't lose their swagger that easily.
Well, they knew that they had played well, and so they really were able to turn around and make some plays. And, you just wish that you had 1 or 2 of those plays back. You go back and you look at the Tig in touchdown, and he's got to just sit for 1 second, but they were going on first down, and you go back in a tip pass that, on that same drive. If you just come away with a field goal on that drive, I mean, it's just a totally different game.
We've been apart covering 3 straight 7-9 seasons, really not knowing the future of Sean Payton, maybe Drew Brees. Is this team going to rebuild? Are they going to get it all together? Well, they got it together this offseason. A great draft. They hit on a lot of free agents. The future is bright. You got to be excited about it, even though this was a tough loss, the future of the Saints moving forward now.
Well, you got 20-plus players on IR. that you'll get back. You'll get that back, and then you have, I think, around $30 million of cap. Now, you know that you have to sign some guys back. You need to get an extension done with Drew, but the future's really, really bright, and they can only continue to add, and, hopefully they can dodge the injury bug.
And final question, you mentioned Marcus Williams, a lot of young players. It's a tough experience for him, but none of them had playoff experience until the last couple of weeks. Going through the battles that they have, that has to serve them well.
Well, it serves them well, and you understand and know what it takes to get to this point. It's always tough. Every year takes on a life of its own, and so for them, hopefully it's motivation to work even extremely harder, so now they're the 1 or 2 seed next year.
All right, Drew, Deuce McAllister has to catch a bus. We're going to let him go, but I appreciate you all season. We'll see you next season.
Appreciate it, brother.
All right, Deuce McAllister. I'm going to wrap it up for Minneapolis, guys. I think we're all still kind of numb here, but the future is bright for the New Orleans Saints.
Deuce, as always, great to have you with us each and every week, either with Mike on the road or here in the studio. All the best. We understand they got to catch that bus to get back to that charter flight. We're going to take one final time out. When we come back, some final thoughts with our Saints insider, certainly our Super Bowl champ, Scott Shanley, as we wrap up what is a shocking and disappointing night for Saints fans as the Vikings move on in the NFC playoffs. Always tough to do a program like this when you know it's the last one of the season, but then again, it's probably tougher being a player when you know it's the last one. You were that close to going to Philly, but the Saints lose it tonight 29-24 to the Vikings, who advance to play the Eagles next week in Philly for the right to go right back to Minnesota. By the way, this is the longest a team has ever gone playing at home with a chance to go back home for the Super Bowl, and Minnesota has a chance to do that. One game on the road, they might be right back in their own dome in 2 weeks. Can you imagine that crowd if they make it? We're going to take it back to Minneapolis in just a moment for some final thoughts, but before we do that, let me ask Eric first and turn to you since you're sitting with me. The Saints season ends, but again, you were 0-2 after several losing seasons in a row, lots of questions about a lot of things. Then all of a sudden, an 8-game win streak that puts you right into the thick of things, and here you are making it to the second round of the playoffs. Certainly a lot of success that you have to look at over the disappointment we had tonight. If I ask you to look at one player that stood out to you more than any other on this ride that the Saints took us on this season, your player would be who?
My player, Victor, would be Alvin Kamara, no question about it. And again, what he did, the dynamic playmaking abilities of Alvin Kamara, not just running the football, but what he was able to do, catching the ball out of the backfield as well. It opened up both parts of the offense, Victor. He opened up the run game. It helped Mark Ingram with what they were able to do as a 1-2 punch, but it also opened up that passing game because you had to account for number 41, and it just kind of snowballed throughout the season. My guy, Alvin Kamara.
Still can't figure out what they were doing in Knoxville with this guy, why he didn't play more for the Tennessee Volunteers, and for him to come out. Remember this just a couple of weeks ago, the little hesitation, and then wind up being a record play in Saints history as he goes $106 on the return and coasts up. I thought it was funny afterwards they were giving him trouble that the official was catching up with him, but that's because he eased up because he knew he'd outrun everybody on that field there in Tampa Bay. Let's take it back to Minneapolis, and let's start with our Saints insider, Mike Neighbors. Once again, with the exception of that one game because of the hurricane early in the season, Mike with the team along the way, at home and on the road, each and every play. Mike, if I asked you the same question, a team that started 0-2 and took us to the second round of the NFC playoffs, if you had to pick one player that stands out to you on this campaign, who would that player be?
Well, Kamara may be the offensive rookie of the year. I think Marshawn Lattimore will be the defensive rookie of the year, and it'll be only the second time that's happened in NFL history, Victor. The first time was 50 years ago when the Detroit Lions did it. Look at Marshawn Lattimore's resume this year. He basically shuts down Julio Jones in 2 games. He has 5 interceptions, is the first All-Pro at the cornerback position for the New Orleans Saints, Pro Bowler, I should say, since 1995. And how many times did you watch this team this season where Lattimore would make a play and you thought, you know what, defenses for the Saints haven't made that kind of play in recent memory? It made a difference. It was a huge difference for this defense and this team. And you know what? He's only a rookie. He's only going to get better, and that's good news for the Saints.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this about the young guys. I'm sorry, Victor. I was just going to say the young guys that you guys picked brought a lot of juice and energy to this team and reinvigorated the veterans on this team. And I think that was the biggest spark that those guys provided. Besides being outstanding players, they provided a spark to the rest of the team.
No doubt about it. This is a rookie class. You could go down maybe the best rookie class in the history of the NFL.
Are they still blowing those Viking horns back there? These guys trying to talk to you. They're getting blown up on the Vikings.
Yeah. They're rubbing it in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can
They're
imagine.
still looking for that first ring, though. They're still trying to find that.
I can imagine. We can hear all that. And, of course, Mike picking an outstanding young defensive guy, and that's one of those players the Saints have been looking for, Scott. We talked about all season long. And, of course, Eric talking about the running game. And while you all were talking, we saw the highlights, the rushing game with all the yards. They put up all the running they did in Buffalo. How about the play when Mike was just talking about Lattimore? All those turnovers, 3 turnovers for scores by the defense. defense against Detroit, 5 total when you include special teams. And Scott, as I come to you now for your thought on one of these players, Lattimore, certainly a standout, a young up-and-comer, is going to be a star for years. Kamara, the same thing. Those are some of the outstanding names that really come top of mind. But there were so many other players that had outstanding seasons. Scott, is there a different player besides Kamara and Lattimore that stands out to you from this season?
Yeah, I think obviously for me, the young guys, you can't go wrong with mentioning those guys. You can't go wrong with mentioning a guy like Drew Brees. But for me, it was Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan, to me, I think should have been in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's the best defensive end in the NFL. He's a guy where when I was walking away from the game, I was the old guy, he was the young guy, he was the rookie. And it's really cool to come back and see a guy like Cam, now the leader. Now he's a veteran. He's in year 7, going into year 8. And to see him turn the corner, he's the leader on this team. He's a captain of this team, and guys go as far as he goes. And every game, when this team needed a play, even today in this game, when this team needed a play to turn a game around, he brought the pressure. Whether it was getting sacks, knocking balls down, putting pressure on Keenum, he helped turn this game around with his individual play.
And how many years, Scott, have we been saying, can the Saints finally get Cam Jordan some help? He got some help this year, and like any great defensive end, when you get help, you're going to make plays. The great thing about Jordan, though, he made plays for a lot of years without much help. We saw you give him a little bit of help, he made that jump this season.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You need help, and then a defensive end's best friend is obviously a cornerback. If you can cover those guys a little bit longer, they can get to the quarterback. But it goes around. Winning always helps get you noticed. Right. And I feel good for guys like Cam Jordan and Mark Ingram, guys who have been here. And when they came on board, we were in that 2011, we were still had everything together trying to win Super Bowls. And then there was a lull in their success, but they brought it back. Young guys, obviously a big reason for that. But a lot of it, guys like Mark Ingram, Cam Jordan, those core nucleus guys in the middle of their careers playing their best football.
Guys, you know, you're so right with so many different players and all the different angles of what they did. And then you talk about the young players. Well, how about Drew Brees? If he's not your MVP, he certainly was revitalized because people were talking about Father Time's on his shoulders. How's he going to do with a lot of these young no-names? Well, it certainly revitalized what Drew Brees was able to do this season. Even when we saw down moments like in the first half, even of tonight's game, to come back with 3 TDs in the second half. How about the drives against Carolina and some of these big games he had throughout the season? Everybody wondering if number 9 still had it. Now, look, we know he wasn't throwing them 60 yards down the field, but Eric, he didn't have to all the times. He had the Michael Thomases, the Alvin Kamaras, the Mark Ingrams. He had that support system that number 9 just gets out there and keeps on trucking.
Yeah, and to set the NFL record for a single-season completion rate again, he's already set it more than once. It bodes well for what this guy has done throughout a career. And, yeah, he didn't throw as many passes this season, didn't have to, kept the interceptions down. A tremendous year by Drew Brees, and always you can check off the boxes for him when you talk about a team MVP.
And certainly the way he played. Michael Thomas, the wide receiver. There are so many that stood out this year for what they did. We want to make sure we get one last comment from Minneapolis because I know they have to get ready to go. They're kicking out all the Viking horns, and they're about to shut things down there in the stadium. So before we say goodnight to Mike and Scott and get their quick final thoughts, guys, here's the favorite moment. Now, one person on this program right now that you can see on the screen had to travel a long way to get this, but we think this might be our top standout moment of the 2017 season. Roll that bean footage.
Who that say gonna beat them Saints?
Have you heard of Drew Brees?
Nope.
Really? Have you heard of Adrian Peterson?
Nope.
All right, let me try one more. Have you heard of Mark Ingram?
Nope.
You don't know any Saints at all?
I know one, Scott Shanley.
You've heard of Scott Shanley?
Yep.
Scott Shanley, how about that?
You better believe it. That's got to be the standout moment because he knew Scott Shanley all the way across the pond when the Saints went over there and got that second win of the season after playing Carolina. It certainly was a lot of fun. Mike, quickly, I know we only have about 3 or 4 minutes before we're going to lose you guys there in Minneapolis. You've been again with the team once again all season long. Just your final thought and reflection on what you saw this season.
You know, I could use a good laugh after this game. That was good stuff there. You know, 13 different Saints scored a touchdown this year. And to me, when Justin Hardy, the rookie free agent they plucked off the Houston Texans practice squad, had that touchdown against the Bucs, I kind of thought it would be the Saints' year. You kind of believe in destiny sometimes. They beat the Redskins, much like they did back in '09. And then when Taysom Hill blocks the kick, it leads to the comeback for the Saints. You start believing. But you know what? Even though they came up short, I'll say this about the Saints. I didn't know this until we heard it from Roman Harper. The fact that this team was still pumped up at halftime, down 17-0. This with the majority of the players of this team having only played in one playoff game. I think the future is very bright for this team. A lot of young guys who have been major contributors.
Yeah, I think when you look at, obviously, the youth.
Oh, let me ask you, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. I was just going to talk. Yeah.
I know we're going to run out of time here in just a moment, but I want to ask you because you can give us a different perspective. You talked about the disappointment in that San Francisco ball game and what it's like to have to rebound. So here you come to this season. They turn around the 0-2 start. They get to this level of the playoffs, and then they lose in ultra disappointing fashion. So can you take us from your position when you experienced it to tonight and what these Saints players will go through? And how long does it take to get out of the system and look back and say, you know what, this wasn't a bad season, and we can build off of this for next year?
It takes a long time, and to be completely honest, the bigger the game, the bigger the moment, the longer it takes to get over. And that's going to be the challenge for these guys. I know they're young, there's a lot of football ahead of them, but they can't let this game, they can't let the way this season ended carry over into next season. And that starts with their preparation. That starts with their, not just physical preparation, getting their bodies right, but getting their mental preparation right. And they're going to find out what the biggest challenge in the NFL is starting over fresh. Every year it takes on a new life of its own. There's going to be teammates they played with that are no longer there. There's going to be different free agents in there competing for jobs. And so you have to be able to take what you learned this season as far as the belief. And I think that was one word that Roman uttered to us about this team. They believed they were champions. They believed they were Super Bowl worthy. It just didn't work out. One play away from, I think, possibly coming back here in Minnesota in a couple weeks, but we'll never know. We'll never know how that game turned out in Philly because of one play, but that's the NFL. Every game, it's a game of inches. Every week, games end up turning out like this over one play.
And one other thing, Deuce McAllister brought up a good point. We could talk about the young guys who didn't have much playoff experience. Over 10 guys on the injured reserve. They have a lot of guys who are going to come back and supplement the great performances we've seen the last couple weeks. Guys like A.J. Klein. You know, we'll see if Kenny Vaccaro comes back or not, but you're going to have guys who didn't play the last couple weeks who were injured who are going to come back. So it's going to be interesting to see how strong this team will be. We'll wait and see on Drew Brees' contract situation, but I think it's going to be an exciting offseason for the Saints.
Guys, I know that temperature is going to be a little colder tonight after what happened just about an hour ago there in the Dome, but it was a pleasure, as always, each and every week with you guys. Scott, safe travels back home. The same to you, Mike, and we look forward to another year next year as the Saints start a new campaign. Thanks for all of your work tonight there in Minneapolis. Scott Shanley, our Super Bowl champ, and our Saints insider, Mike Neighbors. Eric, as we say goodnight to them, though, there is the business, though, the business side of football. You have to come back home. You have to put everything away and realize that, in fact, reality is your season's over. Now for the Saints upper brass, you got to start worrying about players on the roster. You're going to try to bring back players that are going to leave before you start getting ready for the draft. And, of course, we're talking about free agency. And some of the names that are going to be on this list that will be a focus for the Saints executive staff. And, of course, it's all going to start. And Mike Neighbors has talked to Drew Brees, and we've heard that interview in parts now over the last 4 weeks. And everybody wants to talk about, are you going to be back? And his answer has always been, yes, I want to be back. I plan on being back. Fact of the matter is, his name is going to dominate this list because of the salary he commands, the position that he plays.
No doubt it'll be some drama that will unfold in the offseason. It will all start with number 9. But you look at other names on that list, and when Mike brought up right at the very end there, all the major players that were injured this season, double-digit starters lost for the year. I look at Alex Okafor and what that young man was able to do this season from a defensive end position, really kind of led that charge along on the other side with Cam Jordan. So there's all kind of, names on that list. Kenny Vaccaro, what do you do with Kenny Vaccaro? Do you offer him a lot of money, bring him back?
Certainly an impressive list of names that we know can all complement, but now the business side of this has to start in full for the Saints executive staff as they get ready with some of those big names. And I think what Mike said and what Deuce said is so true. Look at what the Saints did to this point with so many bodies that went down. We were kind of joking how many healthy bodies will be standing if they get to Philly and can get back to Minnesota. Still, with all those big losses, the Saints were able to put this success together. I know you don't travel with the team, and I know when they're playing at home, you're wasting an hour and a half of your time waiting for certain quarterbacks from Carolina to come speak. But fact of the matter is, you still cover this team just like we do. I asked Scott and Mike, I want to ask your final thoughts on what you take away from this 2017 campaign.
Well, Victor, when we first started doing Behind Enemy Lines almost 8 years ago now, just right after the Saints Super Bowl season, there was so much joy that I took going into a visiting locker room after the Saints had just put a lambasting on them and won by 20 or 30 on a Sunday night or a Monday night football game. That hasn't been there. I've gone into some joyous visiting lockers over the last 3 years, 3 consecutive 7-9 seasons. Obviously, I've talked to a lot of victorious opponents. That shifted along with what the Saints did this year by winning a division title and going to the playoffs. Think about it. I went into the locker room 9 times this year, and 8 times I talked to losing opponents. So for me, that was good news. You hate to be the guy that goes in and has to talk to the guys that just lost. Right. I loved doing that this year. 8 times out of 9. They went 7-1 in the regular season at home, and of course they won the playoff game at home last week against Carolina. It has been a joy going Behind Enemy Lines this year.
Well, as always, a pleasure working with you. So many lows to start the season, so many highs to end it, and then a crushing loss. But in the end, 29-24. The Vikings win it on the final play of the game. They advance to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Big thanks and props to so many people that you don't see on the set because they're behind the scenes, whether they're in the booth, behind the cameras, everybody live, getting our shots up from location each and every week. We thank you for all the work that you do, and we thank you for joining us all season long. For our Saints insider, Mike Neighbors, Deuce McAllister, Scott Shanley, and Eric Ritchie, I'm Victor Howell. Thanks for joining us all season long on CST, and we'll see you next season.